Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today I'm going to go to my review of WWE Smackdown. Starting off tonight, we have a Cody Rhodes segment. Cody comes out to the ring, grabs a microphone. He calls out the Bloodline. Bloodline end up showing up. Solo mocks Rhodes. Solo says that he would have been champion if it wasn't for Roman Reigns. The crowd starts chanting Roman. Rhodes says that Fatu is the one that deserves the title opportunity. After that, it looks like it is going to be Cody Rhodes versus Solo Sikoa next week for the WWE title. The Bloodline enter the ring. Street Profits and DIY are here as well to back up Cody Rhodes. Nick Aldis is here. Aldis then says that there will be an 8-man tag team main event later on that night. Aldis says that it will be Solo Sikoa versus Cody Rhodes in a steel cage match this Friday night on Smackdown. A couple of things I want to say about this, man, quickly. Number one, again, Smackdown to me is all about Cody Rhodes and the Bloodline. And to be honest with you, this is a big deal matchup because obviously Smackdown is going to be going over to the USA Network. It would be their new home. And what better way to kick off that new partnership, if you will, than to have a main event caliber matchup with Solo Sikoa and Cody Rhodes in a steel cage match for the WWE title. Definitely looking forward to that matchup on SmackDown. Moving on from that, we go into our first official match of the night. It is Bayley versus Tiffany Stratton. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Bayley and Stratton, with Bayley keeping the pace of the match. Bayley hits an elbow drop off the top rope for a near fall. Nia Jax is here. Stratton then hits an Alabama slam for a near fall. Bayley then gets up, attacks Nia Jax, and then Bayley hits the finish, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Bayley. Hats off to Bayley for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Apollo Crews versus Giovanni Vinci. This was Vinci's debut match, if you will, or return match to SmackDown. This was a glorified squash match, man. Apollo quickly gets a roll-up on Giovanni, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Apollo Crews. Hats off to Apollo Crews for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we have a triple threat matchup. It is Kevin Owens versus Grayson Waller versus Austin Theory. I thought it was a decent match. Back and forth matchup between Owens, Waller, and Theory with Owens keeping the pace of the match. Owens then hits a powerbomb on Waller through the table. Theory then hits a rolling blockbuster on Owens, but Owens hits a stunner on Theory, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Kevin Owens. Moving on from that, we have an LA Knight segment. LA Knight comes out to the ring, grabs a microphone, he talks about his title defenses. Carmelo Hayes ends up showing up, he comes out to the ring. Carmelo then mocks LA Knight. Carmelo says that he wants a shot at the U.S. title. After that, Andrade ends up showing up. Andrade mocks Carmelo. LA Knight then mocks Andrade, and then LA Knight hits a BFT on Andrade and Carmelo. Moving on from that, we have Meechin versus Chelsea Green. I thought it was a decent match, back and forth matchup. Meechin was keeping the pace of the match. Piper Niven attacks Meechin, but Chelsea Green hits a unprettier on Meechin, pins her for the 3, and your winner of the match is Chelsea Green. Moving on from that, we go into our main event of Friday Night SmackDown. It is the Bloodline versus the Street Profits and DIY. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between both teams with the Bloodline keeping the pace of the match. Solo hits 2 Samoan spikes, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are the Bloodline. Couple of things I want to talk about when it pertains to SmackDown, man, before I get out of here. I know it was a shorter podcast this time for SmackDown, but there really wasn't a whole lot going on for SmackDown, in my honest opinion. I think, again, I had to reiterate this multiple times. SmackDown, the show itself is based around what Cody Rhodes is doing and obviously the Bloodline. Those are the 2 most vocal points for SmackDown, which is clear as day. And obviously the big, high-profile main event matchup going on this week on SmackDown with Cody Rhodes defending that belt against Solo Sikoa in a steel cage. It's a big deal. It's a high-key matchup, a marquee matchup. Plus, it will be SmackDown, I believe's debut, if I'm not mistaken, on the USA Network, which is a big deal. And what better way to do that than to have one of these high marquee matchups being Cody Rhodes and Solo Sikoa in a steel cage on Friday Night SmackDown for the USA Network. It's a big, big deal for the USA Network as well as SmackDown. But like I said, man, I mean, at the end of the day, the main roster, and I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but I'm going to say it, is firing all cylinders, man. I mean, what Triple H is doing with Raw and SmackDown, and it being a global brand that it is, and the continuation of storylines that they continuously do. I mean, from the Bloodline to the Judgment Day. I mean, you have Raw with Judgment Day, you got SmackDown with Cody Rhodes and the Bloodline. And obviously, I mean, there's still, even with the Bloodline situation, there's still a lot of things that are still uncovered in that situation. And what I mean by that is obviously the big question mark being Roman Reigns. Obviously, Roman Reigns has come back. He returned to WWE at SummerSlam and attacked Solo Sikoa. So we know the agenda of what Roman Reigns wants to do. He wants to become, once again, the tribal chief. We haven't seen Paul Heyman. We've seen Roman a couple times, but we don't know what Roman's going to do. I mean, is Roman going to recruit Jimmy and Jay? Is he going to bring in other members to the Bloodline to have a stable with him to go up against this new Bloodline that's being headlined by Solo Sikoa? I mean, I told you guys multiple times in the past, I think when it comes down to it, when it's brass tacks of all this, at the core of it, it is going to be an ultimate civil war between the new Bloodline and the original Bloodline. And like I said, there's a lot of questions that are still unanswered. And how does Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson fit into that? You know, I don't think Rock, after what happened at WrestleMania, is just going to ride off in the sunset, especially with this Bloodline storyline. And again, where does Cody Rhodes fit into this storyline? Will Cody Rhodes still be a part of this Bloodline situation? Or is Cody Rhodes going to ride off to the sunset with that belt and face other challengers, possibly Randy Orton? I know a lot of people want to see Randy Orton take on Cody Rhodes for that WWE title, even though Randy Orton had just recently lost a heavyweight title matchup against Gunther. You know, so I mean, a lot of things are still up in the air when it pertains to the Bloodline. But, you know, SmackDown, and I told you guys this, the Bloodline is the main focal point of SmackDown. If you guys don't like the Bloodline, then there's no reason why you guys should be watching SmackDown. And then, honestly, for what it's worth, you know, I respect every member of that Bloodline. The new Bloodline, even the old Bloodline. But I will say this, the MVP right now in the current Bloodline, I would have to give it to Jacob Fatu. Jacob Fatu was one of the best signings that WWE has ever put together. I think Jacob Fatu and the body of work that he's put in since he's been with WWE has been absolutely fantastic. And he's a force to be reckoned with, man. I mean, Fatu, I can totally see Jacob Fatu within the next 6 months to a year having championship gold around his waist. And I'm not just talking about the tag team championships. I'm talking about a U.S. title or, you know, the WWE championship. I can totally see that coming down the pike for Jacob Fatu in the next 6 months to a year, especially the U.S. title. Fatu and the Bloodline situation and how, you know, Jacob Fatu is in that Bloodline, it just only benefits him even more. And it's only going to elevate his career tenfold, to be honest with you. I mean, if you guys haven't known what Jacob Fatu did before he got in WWE, I mean, watch some of the clips that he had when he was with MLW. I mean, Fatu is insane. I mean, the moonsault, he's just a force to be reckoned with. And I think Solo Sikoa also sees the same thing, and that's why, you know, Fatu is his quote-unquote bodyguard in the Bloodline. And Fatu does need, you know, single championship gold. I think he is the MVP of the Bloodline. With all due respect to all the members of the Bloodline, Fatu is one of the people in the Bloodline that really, really stick out in the Bloodline. With all due respect to Solo Sikoa. Now, do I think Solo is going to beat Cody Rhodes in that steel cage match? No, I don't. Because my thing is this, at the end of the day, the storyline is not Solo winning the WWE Championship and beating Cody Rhodes. The storyline itself within the Bloodline is Roman Reigns taking down Solo Sikoa and once again becoming the tribal chief. I don't think it's going to have any resemblance. I don't think it's going to have a much impact of him being WWE champion. I don't think that's where the story is. I think the story is Roman dethroning Solo Sikoa and Roman once again being the tribal chief. And again, I mean, there's going to be stories and build up towards that match. I mean, it's going to happen. Whether it's going to be Paul Heyman coming back with Roman starting to recruit other talent, it's definitely going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And I think this is all going to come to fruition at Survivor Series, where we have a War Games kind of matchup where it is the new Bloodline versus the old Bloodline, and may the best team win. And the winner of that is the tribal chief. Where I do think Roman will dethrone Solo Sikoa. You know, but I think for right now, like I said, man, the main roster is firing on all cylinders. I mean, if you look at, even though I'm doing this review for SmackDown now on a Monday, I mean, you look at Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw tonight is on, I believe, the USA Network or Fox or something like that. And, or I think they have, like, they're all on USA. I think it's SmackDown, NXT, and Monday Night Raw. But the first hour of Raw tonight is commercial free, and starting off that is an 8-man tag team street fight with the Wyatt Six and the American Made. and it's a great way to start Raw. So, I mean, at the end of the day, man, I mean, it's the same thing I said about AEW. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we have that alternative with AEW, and then we have what WWE's doing, and they're both doing great. WWE's on a whole other level, and it's a global brand. And at the end of the day, you know what you're getting on Raw, and you know what you're getting on SmackDown. You don't know what you're getting on AEW television. And again, that's, it's a give and take thing. But at the end of the day, I think you know what you're getting on Raw, and you know what you're getting on SmackDown. And at the end of the day, the Bloodline are just taking over SmackDown. And I think it's a great thing. I think it's one of the best things SmackDown has going for themselves right now. And if you're a fan of the Bloodline and Cody Rhodes, that SmackDown is going to be your show because, like I mentioned multiple times, that is the two vocal points of SmackDown, which is Rhodes and the Bloodline. And right now, the Bloodline is one of the best storytelling things going on right now in WWE because nobody really knows what Roman's going to do. We know that Roman came back and his agenda is to dethrone Solo Sikoa, but he has nobody else with him right now besides himself. That's it. He's riding solo right now. Well, that actually sounded pretty bad. He's by himself. You know what I mean? He has nobody with him right now besides himself and maybe Paul Heyman. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to have to see how this is going to play out. My initial thought was that, like I said, Jimmy and Jay were going to come back. Maybe Sami Zayn was going to come back into the fold, but honestly, for what it's worth, man, it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case because Zayn has already called out Gunther for the World Heavyweight title. Jay does not seem like he is even remotely interested at all in rejoining forces with Jimmy or being a part of this Bloodline. So I don't know if they're going to recruit other people outside of WWE to bring in. I know WWE had signed, from what I understand, Hikuleo, which is, I believe, the brother of Tonga and Tonga Loa, and he's a giant. So this could be something where he can join forces with Roman Reigns. I know they have other, family members, obviously, that are that are in the Bloodline that, that are currently wrestling right now. They could possibly come over and be a part of this Bloodline storyline. And again, you also have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and how is he going to factor into this new Bloodline storyline? And where does his alliance lay? Is it with Roman Reigns or is it with Solo Sikoa? Because the last time we've seen The Rock a part of the Bloodline, he aligned himself up with Roman Reigns. Now that Roman is no longer tribal chief, does Rock's allegiance or alliance shift to Solo Sikoa? Does Rock believe that Solo is his tribal chief? And who knows? I mean, the whole storyline even at WrestleMania was that The Rock was the final boss, but he had joined himself up with his cousin, Roman Reigns. And they were trying to do everything they can to take down Cody Rhodes. Well, that's not the same situation now. And I don't even know if Cody Rhodes is even going to factor in to this Bloodline storyline. The only thing I will say is right now that Cody Rhodes has, he's tied up right now with Solo Sikoa, and he has a title defense coming up this Friday on SmackDown in a steel cage match on Friday Night SmackDown, which will be a hell of a match. A great match. Definitely looking forward to it. But like I said, man, I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but Raw and SmackDown are firing on all cylinders, man. They are doing exactly what needs to be done to get the job done. And that's the reason why they're having multiple sold-out shows and multiple sold-out PLEs and having all these events overseas. They just had Bash at Berlin. They went over to France. They went to Puerto Rico. I mean, they're a global brand. And I said this the last time, too, even when I did my review for Bash at Berlin, that I hope that WWE continues to have these PLEs in other countries because I think it benefits not only the fans, but it benefits WWE tenfold. I mean, I think it's a win-win, and I think it gives more eyeballs on the product. I know that WWE had been rumored to possibly have an event, a PLE or WrestleMania possibly in London. Absolutely. I think the fans over in London would love nothing more to have a WrestleMania in London. It's never happened. So to have that opportunity and that opportunity possibly coming down the pike, I'm all for it. I mean, if you look at what WrestleMania did, I think last year when they were in Philadelphia, I mean, it was great. It would probably go down as one of the greatest WrestleManias of all time, just based upon the card and the main event. Seeing John Cena, The Undertaker, The Rock, all in one ring, all in the same night, it was a historic event. So, I mean, my thing is how do you go from that and then topping that from last year going into this year's WrestleMania? So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of ideas floating around. I even thought there was one thing where I even thought that WrestleMania, I don't know how they would do it, but having the WrestleMania type, well, a simulcast, if you will, having the WrestleMania being broadcasted live at the Sphere in Las Vegas, because that, I mean, it looks amazing. I think the UFC is actually trying to have an event at the Sphere in Las Vegas, which is going to be absolutely insane. So I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, there's a lot of things that are coming down the pike, and it's the same even with both companies, AEW as well as WWE. And WWE, they know what they're doing. I mean, at the end of the day, if you look at other companies, let's just I'll put a couple companies down the pike here. If you look at WWE now, and then you look at WCW, and you look at AEW, with WWE and WCW, the reason why that situation kind of worked for both companies at that time, and we'll never have that again, even though we have AEW, that will never happen again. The reason why that shit worked at that time in the 90s is because there was two sides of talent that were floating back and forth from either WWE and WCW at that time. And then even in WCW, even though Ted Turner was a fan of pro wrestling, Ted Turner also had Dusty Rhodes. And the greatest thing about Dusty, and I will say this until the end of time, is Dusty has a great mind for the business. And if you respect this business and this sport, which it is a sport, Dusty Rhodes and the mindset that he had and the amount of events that he put together. I mean, I still believe that people don't even realize what he's done for professional wrestling and the creative mindset that he had. I mean, he created Great American Bash, Starrcade, multiple other events for WCW. And he was a humongous vocal point backstage for WCW I think at one time he was also the head booker for WCW. And it's a great thing to have. And if you look at WWE now, with Paul Levesque being a part of creative control over WWE, look at the progression that WWE is doing now than what it was doing when they were under Vince McMahon and, Bruce Pritchard. I mean, the company was not doing even remotely what they're doing now. Not selling out. No one really gave a shit about the company. There was lackluster matches, lackluster storylines, main event talent not being utilized, getting pissed off, and then eventually leaving the company and going to AEW. And they lost a lot of top talent because of the situation with Vince McMahon. But if you look at the narrative now, you have Triple H running WWE, and then you have AEW with Tony Khan. And again, I get that Tony Khan's a fan of the company, but there's a lot of people, including myself, that think that Tony Khan has a lot of shit on his plate right now. And it's a detriment to the company. My thing is, if we can go back in time and look at what WCW did, if they had a mind for the business, and I said the same thing about Cody Rhodes, and this might be a hot take, but I know with Rhodes leaving, it felt like Rhodes was going to leave. It was inevitable at some point. Rhodes was definitely going to leave at some point of AEW and go back to WWE. It was going to happen because he wanted to win the championship. And I get it. And obviously, for what it's worth, he made a great decision, to be honest with you, because how they treated Cody Rhodes in WWE and what he's doing now, I mean, he is the flagship person right now for WWE. And they're putting that company on his back. And he's doing a hell of a job defending that belt and being a spokesperson and a global ambassador, if you will, for WWE. And he's doing a hell of a job. But looking back on it, and the fact that Cody, to me, wanted a little bit more control, not only of his own character, but a little bit more stake in the company, especially with the addition of Ring of Honor, I would have had Cody, be a GM or run Ring of Honor to take the load off of Tony Khan. Because Cody has a great mind for the business, too. It's not like, I'm not saying he's a Dusty Rhodes, even though he is Dusty's son. But he knows the business. And what better way to, elevate your business than having somebody who's actually been in the ring, understands the ins and outs, and what pro wrestling needs. I think Tony Khan and AEW, it's detrimental to that company. And that's why WWE is so goddamn successful right now, because you have someone like Paul Levesque that is taking this company to other levels that we would never even thought that would ever happen. Ever. I never thought that WWE and UFC will be working together. I never thought that was even remotely even a possibility of happening at all. And here we are. UFC and WWE are technically partners under TKO. And I never thought that was ever going to happen. And because of that, it's elevating WWE as well as the UFC, because now they're both working under the same umbrella with TKO, and it's a humongous deal. And I'm not saying AEW is not trying to do what they can, but right now no one knows what AEW is doing. You look at a situation like there was news coming out today about AEW with Shockwave, and people ask me, well, what do you think the Shockwave shit's about? To be honest with you, I think it comes down to a TV deal. I think that maybe AEW doesn't have an exclusive deal with Time Warner and Warner Media. And I think that Tony Khan's also looking at another company such as Fox. I know he has been in conversations with Fox, and Fox is no longer in the company of WWE. And I think personally that AEW Shockwave is going to be a new television show for AEW which will, if I had to guess, probably be on Friday nights, and Rampage will be completely just taken out of the picture. And we will have Dynamite, Shockwave, and Collision as AEW's top 3 shows for the company, with Shockwave not being a part of the Warner Media family, and Shockwave possibly going over to Fox or Fox Sports 1, which is a big deal. But right now, nobody literally knows what the hell is going on with AEW and their TV rights deal. Nobody knows. And I talked about this earlier when I gave you guys my All Out review. Nobody knows. I think right now, just with WWE and AEW, I mean, they're vastly different. They're vastly different. WWE is miles ahead of AEW. AEW has a lot of catch up to do. Do I think they're still the alternative? Yeah. I mean, if you like for example, if you like what you saw at All Out, then I guess they are the alternative. But if you don't, then obviously there's WWE. We're never going to have this Monday Night War kind of scenario between AEW and WWE. That's never going to happen. That dream or fascination is gone. It's never going to happen. We got that in the 90s. And don't get me wrong, it was a great time to be a wrestling fan. If you guys watch wrestling in the 90s and you were a part of that Attitude Era and Monday Night Nitro and that whole Monday Night War era, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, that was a time in wrestling that was just absolutely insane. Because at the time, you didn't know who was showing up on Monday Night Raw, and you damn sure did not know who was showing up on WCW Nitro. I mean, I think it was the first episode of Nitro we saw Lex Luger debut, and it was in a WCW Nitro ring at the Mall of America when he was pretty much toe-to-toe with Hulk Hogan. Nobody ever thought that was going to happen. And not only that, Lex came over to WCW when Lex was on a hell of a run with the Lex Express and everything else and going up against Yokozuna. So I did not think at that time that Lex was jumping ship and going over to WCW. And not taking anything away from the talent that we have now, because there's talent all over the place, from WWE to AEW. But back then, honestly, it was a hell of a lot different. In my honest opinion, like, for example, it would be in this generation, it would have been if John Cena would have said to hell with WWE and he would have showed up on AEW Dynamite television. It would be the same thing with when Hogan left and showed up at WCW. It's the same exact thing. And we don't have that. And then that never happened. So that dream is dead. And I mentioned this multiple times too. If you look at the narrative of Dynamite, it has a lot of resemblance to what WCW was in early to late 2000, when the company was literally draining money and they didn't even have the money to keep their show going. And you see Vince show up on Monday Night Nitro, I think in Panama City, Florida, saying, hey, I bought my competition. And then it was over. Nitro was done. It was like one of the worst days of professional wrestling. And yes, I am a WCW fan. Sorry. Not saying I'm not a fan of WWE, but I was a fan of WCW. And it was a dreadful day because a lot of this talent that we saw in WCW did not go over to WWE. It didn't happen. And if it was a very, very short stint that they had in WWE. Hell, even look at DDP's career in WWE. It did not last long compared to what his career was in WCW. Even though he was up there in age. His WWE career was just nothing. He had one good storyline with Undertaker, and that was it. You know what I mean? You look at Scott Steiner. And Scott Steiner, compared to his career from WWE to WCW, it's night and day. Rick Steiner didn't have a career in WWE. It was done. Booker T flourished. Absolutely. And some other guys did too. Eddie Guerrero did. Benoit did. Dean Malenko, not so much. And I was a huge fan of Dean. I think Dean was severely underrated and one of the best cruiserweights that ever came out of professional wrestling, in my honest opinion. He was severely underrated. And obviously it paid off for Rey Mysterio, because Rey Mysterio still to this day wrestles, and he's had a hell of a career. But there are some current, or not current, but there was WCW talent that just were not utilized correctly. Hell, I don't even think Goldberg's first stint when he came into WWE was a great run. He hated his time there. His matches were not the greatest. He did not want to be there. He was miserable in his first run. He could not stand it. So I mean, at the end of the day, it's we're never going to get that Monday Night War between AEW and WWE. And long story short, like I was saying, the reason why WWE is doing so well right now is because A, they're a global brand that's been around for years. And two, you have somebody at the helm with Paul Levesque that knows exactly what the hell he's doing. I mean, if you look at even NXT, when NXT first came around, and he really elevated NXT to the black and gold brand. And if you guys watch NXT just like I did, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. He took talent that nobody knew anything about. No one's watching these people on the indies, because you really can't watch wrestling from all these other athletes, men and women, on the indies, because it's not being televised. It's pretty much hearsay. of who this person is or who this person may be. And then when NXT comes around and Triple H brings in this independent talent like a Johnny Gargano, a Ciampa, Adam Cole in the Undisputed Era with Kyle O'Reilly and Roderick Strong and Bobby Fish and Aleister Black, the amount of talent that he had brought in and put on for us fans for those NXT takeovers were absolutely incredible. And he built superstars in NXT Black and Gold. And we don't have that now with NXT. And it's a shame. It really is. And I'm not trying to take anything from Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels is a fantastic wrestler, but it's not the same NXT that we all once known of. You know what I mean? And a lot of things, and things change, and I get that. But I'm just saying, in retrospect, I mean, Triple H knows what he's doing. And he's taking this company to limits that we never thought as fans that we would ever see. And it's going to continue to grow, man. It's definitely going to continue to grow. And like I said with SmackDown, you know, you're getting that on Friday nights as well as Monday Night Raw. He's continuing storylines and storylines that matter, and he's getting people in tune and invested every single week to want to tune in to every single Monday Night Raw or SmackDown because he always leaves you with that cliffhanger. He's doing a hell of a job, and the storytelling for WWE is top notch. It's leaps and bounds above AEW, absolutely. So it's going to get you invested in the company, and I think that's great. And that's why I said I don't want to keep sounding like a broken record, but they're leagues above everybody else right now. And they're doing a fantastic job. I mean, the PLEs are great. I know they got Bad Blood coming up here soon in Atlanta, Georgia, October 5th, I believe. Definitely looking forward to that and how that's going to play out. You know, how's the card going to shape up and who's going to be on the card? You know, and Bad Blood was a pay-per-view that was back in the day that, you know, Triple H had brought back into this new generation of talent and new generation of fans. You know what I mean? Bad Blood was a great event. I think Triple H was actually a part of the Bad Blood pay-per-view. So to bring that back into the fold, it's great. You know? And you know, obviously NXT working with TNA. Never, ever thought that WWE would be willing to work with any other company besides themselves. But here we are with NXT working with TNA and actually having TNA World Champions coming over to WWE television defending their belt. I think Jordynne Grace is coming over to NXT here soon to have an open challenge to defend her TNA Women's Championship. Never thought in a million years that we'd ever see WWE willing to work with another company. Ever. Even back in the day. I mean, you look at WCW, yeah, they worked with, you know, AAA and CMLL and obviously working with New Japan. That was great. And it benefited the company a hell of a lot. But WWE never, I mean, besides, if I had to look back on WWE, they did do a little something with ECW, but nothing to the extent of what they're doing, I think, with TNA, to be honest with you. I mean, yeah, they had the invasion angle and stuff like that, but it wasn't like even at that point that ECW was even around, nor WCW. They really weren't. Those companies were bought out. You know, WWE bought those companies out, so they just revamped those brands to have an angle with the invasion angle in that storyline. But other than that, I mean, those companies weren't even around at that point. So it wasn't like WWE was working with WCW back in the day. That was never going to happen because Vince hated Turner and Turner hated Vince. It was never going to happen. Turner knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to go head-to-head and battle Vince McMahon on Monday nights, and that's why we had the Monday Night Wars between Monday Night Raw and Monday Night Nitro. You know, and I'm not going to sit here and say that WWE, like, wrestling now is not in a renaissance. I'm not going to say that because, like, now in today's day, just with the American fans alone, there's not just that one not that one wrestling show. It's not just WWE. Now we have WWE as well as AEW. And people can say what they want. Oh, AEW needs to close its doors, and oh, it's bad for business. No, it's not. It's not, because at the end of the day, it gives these men and women that do wrestle the opportunity to make their money and to wrestle somewhere else if they choose not to wrestle with WWE, and they don't have to go overseas or work the indies. You know what I mean? And people can say, oh, there's TNA. Yeah, there is TNA. And TNA, I will give TNA Wrestling all the props in the world because they have been around for a very, very long time, and they are still pushing. And back in the day, for what it's worth, TNA had a hell of a roster. I mean, I still said it to this day, and I'm not the biggest Jeff Jarrett fan, but Jarrett's best in-ring career shit that he's ever done has been with TNA. Hands down. His WWE career was shit, and his AEW career is not that great either. His TNA run as the King of the Mountain and Jeff Jarrett and what he's done in TNA was his best in-ring career shit that he's ever done. Hands down. And I will stand on that hill by myself and argue that to the death because, I mean, not only that, Jarrett was the head booker for TNA, and he had a lot of close ties with Dixie Carter, who was the president and CEO of TNA Wrestling at that time. So they were building Jeff Jarrett to be this Hall of Fame act for TNA. And he had a hell of a career. Had great matches with AJ Styles, matches with Sting, matches with Kurt Angle that were really, really good matches. Samoa Joe, and other people there that were in TNA made a great name for themselves. AJ Styles, number one, Samoa Joe. Those guys made names for themselves, and look at them now. Future Hall of Famers. So, I mean, yeah, it's a give or take thing, man. But at the end of the day, we're talking about SmackDown, and SmackDown, again, firing on all cylinders, and a lot of the, SmackDown is based around what Cody Rhodes is doing as well as the Bloodline. And if you're not a fan of that, then you're not going to be a fan of SmackDown. But I'm a fan of it, and I'm looking forward to hopefully hearing about what Roman Reigns is going to do, and looking forward to this matchup, man, between Cody Rhodes and Solo Sikoa in this steel cage match on SmackDown, I believe's debut of their new home, the USA Network. But with that being said, this is my review of WWE SmackDown. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.